Hello, welcome, thank you all for coming. This is the Candy FemSoc Society panel discussion on intersectionality within feminism.
Is this, oh yeah, Happy International Working Women's Day, everyone. So Candy FemSoc are having a panel. We're going to have about 45 minutes of talking, then we're going to take some questions. So if any ideas come into your head, just save them for the end. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Rosamund. I joined the FemSoc this year. I'm an activist. I work with Sisters Uncut and other organisations that fight against domestic violence. This is Kaya. Do you want to introduce yourself? Say about yourself.
I joined FemSoc this year. I don't have much to say so far, but I'm ready to talk to you guys.
Oh, well, I'm Carissa. I've been a member of the FemSoc since last year. I'm part of Stand Up, Stand Out, which is a migrant youth adult movement which fighting against racism and just inequalities. I'm Tatiana.
I joined the FemSoc last year. I'm a campaign leader for Stand Up, Stand Out, which is a migrant youth-led movement fighting migrant oppression in London. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here to talk to you guys about intersectional feminism.
Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam. I use he, him pronouns, by the way. I'm an intersectional feminist and I mainly focus on LGBTQ activism and mental health activism. And I'm part of the Duke of Edinburgh's LGBTQ branch and other LGBTQ activism groups.
And me and Carissa are going to be facilitating and asking the questions. We'll probably be answering some of them as well because we feel our experiences are relevant to them. So just a little bit of housekeeping and general stuff before we start. So this is a self-acclaimed intersectional panel, but we want to acknowledge the fact that we cannot represent every single person who intersectional feminism wants to represent. We do not we're not completely representative, but we feel that we are as representative as we can be. Everyone in this room and at this panel has a unique experience of life, facing different inequalities and oppressions, some more than others, and all of which are interlinked and difficult to deal with. We want to make this space as safe and inclusive as possible. However, we acknowledge that others can be oppressing towards others without or with acknowledging it. If you feel that this is an issue or that something comes up that you find to be oppressive or not intersectional, feel free to raise it with us, and we want to go through it and better ourselves because that's what being an intersectional feminist is about. There is also a mental health officer at the panel, so if anything discussed here upsets you or is difficult, feel free to talk to them afterwards. There's also a list of organisations that you can reach out to in the zine if there's anything that impacts you that you maybe don't want to talk about to anyone else.
Fire exit there. If we don't have it scheduled, so if it goes off, please leave in an orderly fashion.
Because it will be a real fire.
It will be a real fire. Sarah Mack is the name of the mental health support person that's meant to be around. The Candy Society, FemSoc, has been doing quite a few things in the college recently. I think one of the biggest things that we did at the beginning of the year was put free sanitary products in the college so that they're available if you need them. And we're also running a trigger warning campaign currently, and we're currently running a trigger warning campaign, which is going quite well. Thank you. It should be done soon. And yeah, we're selling the zine, so please, if you have £1.50, if you could buy them, that'd be great because it's all going to rape crisis.
Yes, rape crisis.
Yeah.
Great charity. Okay, so I think we're going to start with the questions now. So the first question is, how would you define intersectional feminism? And we're going to go along. So we'll start with Sam.
Okay. For me, intersectional feminism is a rights movement that is inclusive and acknowledges the individual struggles of people of colour, disabled people, queer and non-cis people, people with mental health issues, working class people, and everyone whose life is made more difficult by systematic and social oppression.
My definition of intersectional feminism is basically a form of feminism which basically understands that different kind of people go through different oppressions, and these oppressions can interlink, and that people go through oppressions of like different severities, and that's valid and that should be acknowledged. So that's basically how I feel.
Yeah, likewise, I think intersectional feminism is just inclusive and takes into account that not, this is going to sound so cheesy, but not all oppressions are created equal, but doesn't mean that your oppressions are not valid. They are, and I think this panel is just to make sure that we're all coming together and expressing our own valid opinions and experiences.
I'd say intersectional feminism is about taking into account all the factors that make us different, and also giving a platform to people who haven't had a voice that's being heard, and giving people the chance to talk about things that don't get talked about a lot in our society.
I'd say that intersectional feminism is feminism that works to centre narratives that have been disregarded in the past, so narratives of women who have helped build the feminist movement from the ground up, but have been completely washed over by history. So black and brown women, sex workers, migrant women, all of whom have contributed amazing stuff to our society, but like most of whom we hear very little about in comparison to white middle class feminists who dominate the scene because they have the most access to everything. So the second question is, how do you feel that you fit into mainstream feminism today, and what can be done to stop you feeling like an outsider? So would anyone like to start with that one?
Okay, I'll start. So today, well, back in the day, I didn't feel as though I belonged in feminism, because whenever I spoke about feminism, like, we were always talking about people like Emmeline Pankhurst, and nobody ever mentioned Alice Walker, nobody ever mentioned Audre Lorde. Until like recently, and I've noticed that like black girl magic is a real thing, it's something that exists today as a concept. When I was growing up, that never existed. I never knew that black girls felt comfortable in their blackness as girls. So I feel like now there's like, we're opening the discussion more, and black women and brown women are taking ownership of like feminist narratives, and people are realising that these are people that deserve to be visible. So now I would say that feminism is getting better at including people that aren't white middle class women. And I do feel like I integrate into modern day feminism, but I do think that a lot needs to be done in terms of like alienation. So one problem I find is that feminism can be very inaccessible, and the fact that, to just take like feminist jargon, for example, like people feel excluded from feminist conversations because they don't know all the terms. But people have these feelings inside, they just don't know how to like express them with words, and it can be a bit alienating when you hear like big words like intersectionality or like non-binary, people like, what the hell? So yeah, that could help, I think, making it more accessible, personally.
Now that we all have like access to social media like Twitter and Instagram, I think that's opened up like a whole new community for people who felt left out. And so I feel like now that I have access to like Twitter and Instagram, I'm starting to like branch out and have conversations with women who I haven't been able to have conversations with before. But it's also allowed me to talk to people, transgender people, non-binary people, Native American women who I don't have in my life, who are educating me about things that I don't even know about. And so I think social media has definitely helped me feel like I fit into like intersectional feminism a lot more than I used to feel.
I've got several points. I feel like, although mainstream feminism is definitely improving, many feminists do not acknowledge that transgender males like me do not have male privilege, and that we're treated very differently to cis men. That makes me feel particularly excluded, because a lot of feminists think that I do not need a safe space or an outlet to express myself, which, although I do recognise that I have many privileges, is something that I individually need as a person. As well as this, a lot of feminists are cis-oriented and are not comfortable with discussing trans and non-binary issues because they are unfamiliar with it, and because they're cis, they don't really think that because it personally connects to them that it's actually necessary to talk about, which I completely disagree with. And I think probably the most important point is that lots of feminists are not ready to include trans and non-binary people who do not look cis. They are uncomfortable with representing those who haven't transitioned, don't want to transition, or don't conform with particular masculine or feminine expectations that society brings on them, and they want to basically just include the trans people that they feel comfortable with looking at, such as people who transition like Laverne Cox and Caitlyn Jenner. And while those people are equally as valid and they're wonderful people, I mean, Caitlyn Jenner, not really a wonderful person, but, you know, while they deserve to be included and they definitely deserve to be represented, I think that intersectional feminism should be more inclusive of trans and non-binary people who have not transitioned or don't conform to certain societal expectations.
Well, when I was growing up, I had like lots of internalized misogyny and lots of internalized racism, which I only started to like get rid of when I was like maybe 13 or 14. And so, I mean, I guess it's just making, when I was growing up, I think it would be a lot nicer to have representation of black women everywhere. I mean, recently I saw an advert and it had like two girls kissing, and it was just like, sorry, this isn't the book, but yeah, I'm also queer, but I think just being able to see yourself in media would help you internalize like oppressions more. And so I think we're making a step now to be more inclusive and to be more feminist, I guess, be more feminist, so that I can see myself in more places, and so I feel more accepted. But there's still a bit to go.
For me, I feel like I have a lot of privilege as like a white passing person, so in a lot of feminist spaces, like my voice is a lot more recognised than like my black or brown friends who have their voices like discarded quite a lot more. But for me, I personally feel like I get really frustrated within a lot of mainstream feminism because so many people will like share stuff on Facebook, tweet stuff, but very few people will take action beyond their words. Like you can put intersectional feminist in your Twitter bio, but what are you actually doing to support your black and brown friends, to support your queer friends, to support your trans friends? Like, I think the next step for everybody is like, okay, feminism's popular now, that's great, it's not a dirty word anymore. The next step is to start acting on your beliefs. Like, people come to, people with relative privileges, I want to see them at protests, because usually the people I see at protests are the ones who are the most affected, who are the most vulnerable. When you go to protest, like, you shouldn't just have to, like, it shouldn't be undocumented people protesting for undocumented rights. It should be undocumented people being protected by their allies and people who say they care. Like, you can read about it in The Guardian all you want, but, like, just, I want to see some action as well. That's my key frustration.
Is this working? You don't always like have to take to the street. Like Girls Got Hair and said the revolution will not be televised. It can be an internal thing, just how you interact with people on a daily basis. Question things, like that is a form of alliance. So like personally, I'm not a big fan of always like taking to the streets to protest, but I understand that you can be an activist and you can be an ally in other ways.
Definitely, I think like making sure your allyship is like part of your everyday life and not just like once a year sort of thing, because not everybody, like, you definitely have to recognise a lot of people have privileges. Protests aren't always accessible for disabled people, people of colour, for multiple reasons. And,
yeah, speaking as from a marginalised group, I think that sometimes just talking to like people that are like, just talking to your friends about the oppression that you face, it's just helped so much. A friend of mine said radical softness, and it's just such a, I thought it was such an amazing concept. So it's like, because when you're not allowed access to your emotions sometimes because you've got to be strong all the time, being able to be sad and being able to be vulnerable it is radical and it is political. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add that I think although it is very important to take to the streets about feminist issues, we have to acknowledge that some people are not in a safe position at home to go to protests. Some people have mental or physical disabilities, and some people have mental illnesses which do not put them in a safe and comfortable position to go to protests and things like that. So we do have to acknowledge that although there are lots of people who do want to participate in the most kind of stereotypical activist kind of way, they are not able to, and we should be protesting for them as well. We should be protesting for the people who cannot protest themselves.
Okay, another question. How do the impenetrable stereotypes surrounding feminists, those of us who are especially women of colour, example, strong black woman and angry black girl, impact you?
Okay, I have a recent example. So my hair's out in an afro today, and I came into school, and I went to my friend, and I had a white girl say to me, "Oh, you strong, independent black woman." Like, and it's like stuff like that, and people don't realise like the kind of like expectations and stereotypes they're imposing on me when they say stuff like that. But when you say that, it's like you're stripping me of my humanity. Like, because I'm a strong black independent woman, I'm not allowed to be upset, I'm not allowed to be fragile, I'm not allowed to be angry. And then when I do act that way, it's like I'm made like to be a militant figure. Like, why are you so angry? Why are you so upset just because I'm black? So I feel like it's hard. I feel like I'm not allowed to live as a black woman because all of these expectations are pushed onto me. And it's a constant battle to fight this because it's like, I know I need to be strong because like there's so much against me, but I need to be a human and I need to be allowed to be a human. So it does cause a lot of conviction because it's like I don't know how to act and I don't know how to respond to people that expect me to act in a certain way. So yeah.
I think sometimes I talk to other women and I feel that they have the sense of, like they'll say, they won't necessarily call me a strong black woman, but they'll phrase it kind of subtly. And I feel like it kind of limits the conversation that you can have with them because they have these like preconceived ideas about you. And so like your words can be misinterpreted as angry and aggressive. And I think sometimes being a woman of colour, people don't see that you do have vulnerabilities and that you're not this armoured woman who's hitting out at the world. That deconstruct that idea of black women and women of colour, that we might have a voice and we might talk about our opinions strongly, but like we are vulnerable, and let us be vulnerable, I think, is allow us to be vulnerable and to feel like in conversation with you we can be vulnerable.
For me, like, I think I find myself censoring myself a lot, especially around my friends who are white, like, because I always, like, I have such a fear of, like, living up to that stereotype of, like, oh, this, like, the crazy, like, brown girl just, like, won't shut up, like, won't stop talking, like, talking all the time, getting really angry, like, it's a really big fear of mine, and I've definitely, like, changed how I've spoken to people over the years, changed how I presented myself so I didn't fit into that stereotype, like, because it was always a really big fear of mine to be put in that box. And like, I guess along with that, like, these stereotypes, like, if you're a strong feminist, like, if you do a lot of activism and stuff as well, like, for me personally, like, in activist circles, when you're, like, you do a lot of hard work, which is great and I love it, but sometimes you'll just have days where you're so tired, like, you can't reply to your emails, you can't reply to these messages, you just want to, like, lie in bed and watch Gilmore Girls and be small and, like, sad, and that's okay too, but feeling that you have to, like, present a certain image to people, like, because also I find that some people are like, oh, this is really cool, like, this is actually so inspiring, and then you're like, you feel like you have something, you have to be something for other people, you have to present a front so other people can, like, find something within you that they look up to or something like that. And so when you have those bad days, it's like, oh, well, am I going to change how I am for other people, or am I going to stay how I am for me? And it's a very, like, conflicting situation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, personally as a black woman, I used to struggle with this so much. I had so much, like, internalized racism that I just completely just got rid of any sort of, like, black culture that was around me. So, like, when I was younger, I did not listen to rap music. I did not like this before. I didn't like anything that could even begin to make me be associated with being black, which I've only just started to, like, reflect now. And it's a bit awkward because I don't really fit in at family meetings and stuff. But also, being, like, finally coming into my own skin and, like, being able to say I'm a black woman and being able to say I'm not. If I am angry, I have a reason to be angry, and I'm allowed to be angry. And I've just stopped, you know, catering to people that are like, oh, Carissa, you're just angry all the time. Yeah, I'm angry. I'm oppressed. Leave me alone. I think you just need to, like, start dropping these people out of your life. I mean, I think it comes to, I mean, we are in the feminist area. This is a trendy thing now. It's trendy to be feminist. I mean, it's trendy to be feminist. So do more work. If I'm angry, there's a reason I'm being angry. Don't ask me why I'm angry. Look at the word racism. Look at the word sexism. It's not that hard. So yes.
Yeah, I definitely feel that a lot of the time, when something comes up in the workplace or at home or at college or anything like that, which compromises your kind of feminist identity and which is disrespectful, if you lose your shit, you're not taken seriously because you're just an angry feminist and you've got to stay calm. But for example, I remember in secondary school, there there was a queer girl who I was friends with, who, like, a guy in her class, literally, and this is a really, really upsetting thing, but I feel like I need to say it because I shouldn't censor myself. He literally said trannies should be strung up, and the response by the teacher was, you can discuss that when the lesson's over. And Charlotte was very, very angry about it. This is the person who was, like, involved. She was very angry about it. She was not allowed to speak up, and she wasn't taken seriously because it wasn't appropriate for the classroom. And just the fact that people aren't taken seriously when they are allowed to get angry and this kind of thing can be really hindering to a lot of feminists, because we can't be expected to stay calm when our very existence is sort of, you know, invalidated and undermined.
I think also, like you were saying, if I'm angry, there's definitely a reason to be, like, owning the stereotype as well, being like, hell yes, I'm an angry brown girl. Like, do you want to know why I'm angry? Pick up a history book, look at what's in there. Like, do you want to talk about American interventionism in the Middle East? I have all day. Like, anger, like, your anger is valid and it makes you more powerful, and it's something that I think we have learned to distance ourselves from because it makes white people uncomfortable. It makes a lot of cis men uncomfortable, and like, embracing that, taking that back and being like, you know what, this is who I am, and if it bothers you, the door's that way, you're free to leave.
Does this work? Okay. So, like, I don't think it's only, like, white or, like, cis people that feel uncomfortable when you're openly angry. Like, I have family members and other black people that want me to whisper when I say the word white people, or don't like it when I get angry. So it's just like, loads of people just in general, even the people that are supposed to be your allies and the people that go through the stuff that you go through, are uncomfortable with your anger too when they feel it as well. And, like, it makes you realise that it takes time for people to become comfortable with their anger. For me, I spent 15 years of my life hating who I am as a black person. And I was never really comfortable with that anger until I cut off all of my black hair. And I was like, it's okay to feel like this, and I'm not going to suppress myself anymore. I'm going to make sure I'm visible. So it's like, it takes time, and it's like about self-awareness. Like, it takes a lot of freedom and strength to be comfortable with your anger. Because you always beat, well, me personally, I used to beat myself up about it for being angry at people. When really, I'm not the problem. Everyone else is, not me. But, yeah.
Yeah, when someone tells you they're uncomfortable with talking about oppression, tell them that oppression makes you more than uncomfortable in your everyday life. So for example, every time a person of colour leaves a house, every time a queer person leaves a house, they have to prepare themselves, whether subconsciously or consciously, that they may never come home because of something that could happen to them. So if a white man says he's uncomfortable with you talking about something, say, well, my life is fucking uncomfortable, so you just have to deal with it.
So, next question is, how do colorism and misogyny affect your experiences within intersectional feminism? Because as much as we like to say spaces are intersectional, racism and colorism and anti-blackness creep in as they do everywhere. So this is, I think, specifically a question for the black girls on the panel, if you guys want to answer.
Oh, well. Actually, I always considered myself as dark skinned, but actually a while ago, I was with some friends of mine that were, like, darker than me, and they were like, oh yeah, Carissa, you're light skinned, so you benefit from that privilege. And I just accepted that, because obviously I'm not going to say, well, actually we all go through the exact same struggle being black, because no, it's not the exact same. You know, white supremacy makes that there is a scale even in your blackness of being pretty and being ugly. And there's no point trying to say that it doesn't exist, because it does, and yes, we do need to work on it.
Yeah. Well, you guys know who Amanda Stenberg is? So, yeah, Amanda, I love Amanda, and Amanda's done a lot for intersectional feminism, but we can't deny that Amanda is a light-skinned person, and I feel as though if we're going to make intersectional feminism be inclusive, we need to represent dark-skinned women as well within feminism. I don't hear a lot of talk about other dark-skinned feminists that are doing good things in, like, pop culture and stuff. So that's one concern I have. But also, like, just not even with feminism, just like the way, like, other black women interact with other black women because of, like, their skin colour. So my mum, she's light-skinned and I'm dark-skinned. And I remember growing up, and she bleaches, and it always used to make me feel upset because it's like, you're light skin, you're privileged, why are you bleaching? Like, what do you think about me? And I internalized that subconsciously, and I realized that because of that, it gave me like a skewed perception on like skin color and blackness. I always thought that light skinned girls were the most prettiest, and that darker skinned girls were like ugly. And it's funny how with like this new wave of intersectional feminism, dark skin is like almost fetishized. But back in the day, you guys weren't rating us. Like, you guys were saying our skin, we look blick. Oh my God. The amount of times I was called blick in secondary school, and now like all of these people are coming up to me calling me melanin goddess. Nah, G, go. Like,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, my dark chocolate Nubian princess
Yeah,
queen.
like,
It's so cringy. If you ever go out with somebody and one of those is because of their race, don't do it.
yeah.
Don't do it. Think about it in your head. Think about it real hard, and then don't do it. Because it's weird. You can't date somebody because they're black. It's weird. You shouldn't date somebody because they're white. It's weird, right? Yeah. Yeah. How are you affected by assumptions of sexuality and gender?
So I think there are like in a lot of feminist spaces, even intersectional feminist spaces, you will always be presumed to be cis, like a lot of the time, and especially for me because I used to be really femme presenting, like have long hair, and I still wear a lot of makeup most days, and it's like, well, people just presume that you're she, so I identify as non-binary, and like, I prefer they, them pronouns, but I honestly have got to the point where I just cannot be bothered to correct people every time because it's so exhausting. And it's like, you know what, I'm living my life. If you can't be bothered to take 5 minutes to correct yourself, I'm not going to do it either. Like, I'm not your mum, learn. And also, like, I think for me, like, again, recently, like, for those of you who don't know, I got my hair cut recently. It was a very dramatic experience. And like, when you have your hair short, you're like, oh my God, you look so gay now. I was like, actually, I look gay as I did before. Like, I've always been this gay. I'm never not going to be as gay as I am. Short hair, long hair, bald head, Mohican. Like, if I had a beard, I'd still be gay. And it's like, I hate how this idea of like appearance and sexuality interact with each other, especially for people who are from other cultures. Like, would I look gay if I was wearing my hairscarf, if I was in like my traditional clothes? No, I wouldn't. You just presume that I was straight. It's this idea that gay people look a certain way, queer people look a certain way, and that's all wrapped up in whiteness and Western culture because we're told that that's where like queerness is protected and safe. But if you look at it, homophobia often comes to countries through white culture. That's when it was introduced via colonialism. And yeah, it's really annoying.
I think I need to get that queer look. Girls, please ask me out. No, that's a joke, please don't ask me out. Yeah, yeah, being queer and being a woman is like really awkward because you assume straight, but then when people find out that you're queer, they're like, oh, I don't think I'm going to get changed next to you anymore because you're going to start hitting on me. No, Becky! No!
Guys, you're never that attractive. Like, honestly, don't worry about it. Your personality put me off. Like,
I used to get that all the time in secondary school. Like, so I'm a girl that likes girls. And I remember when I came out to my friends in secondary school, like, they used to treat me funny, like, they wouldn't want to hold my hand or link arms with me anymore. And it's just like, wow, like, I'm still a girl, you know. But just because, it's just wild.
Yeah, I have a couple of like funny stories about stuff like that. There's a guy who goes to a youth theatre group that I'm in, who's really, he goes to a men's like private school, like it's literally a mansion in the countryside, so you know he hasn't really experienced much. And my sister is quite an androgynous looking person with like, you know, she's got colourful hair and she's got the whole, I don't know, like Winona Ryder look going. And then he was like to my sister one day, oh, are you gay? And she was like, why did you say that? And he was like, this is literally what he said, I've known a few lesbians in my time and you were giving off the vibe. And it was like, what is the vibe? I'm sorry, but can you define that for me, please? And there was also once, when I was in year 10, I was holding hands with my friend in my media class, and I recently come out as queer because I was in a relationship. And then this girl came up to that friend, Lise, afterwards and was like, oh, why are we holding Sam's hand? And she was like, because we're friends and we want to. And this is literally what she said. But won't she catch feelings for you and dump her girlfriend? Yeah, because it's contagious like that, isn't it? Like, it's completely awful and people don't realise what they're saying. I also want to add something that everyone actually experiences probably. Oh, Thanksgiving dinner, your grandpa's like, hey, so you got a boyfriend? And you're just like... We all experience that. And I think that it should be acknowledged that the place where you're supposed to be yourself is at home. And that a lot of people cannot be themselves at home, and if someone is expressing themselves in college, if someone is expressing their queerness, if someone is expressing their non-cisness in college, then you shouldn't inhibit them just because you shouldn't, but also because you have to acknowledge that for some people this is the only space where they really can be themselves. So I think we should definitely respect the fact that if someone's queerness makes you uncomfortable, we literally just have to put up with it, because, I don't know, people deserve to be themselves, and a lot of young people can't be themselves anywhere else.
Yeah.
I think one of the annoying things about telling people that you're queer, specifically telling boys that you're queer, is they have this obsession with trying to like turn you like straight, like
Or get you in bed with
yeah,
them.
and it's like
That's something that happens.
that doesn't actually work, guys. Like it's so annoying. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, also for me, I'm like, I have two mums, and a lot of people are very confused by this. And like, the funniest thing is when people try and be PC, they try so hard. They'll be like, could you explain your family tree to me? And it's like, oh, so you want to know like where I came from and how I happened, basically. And also, I think people are like, oh, so you're gay because you have two mums, right? I'm like, no, that just didn't come into effect. Are you straight because you have a mum and a dad? Like, people just like have these really weird ideas of how being brought up in a queer household affects you and like how it impacts you, and like it comes from this definitely internalized homophobia. It's like, oh, those like weird predatory queers shouldn't be allowed children. You'll turn them gay, and it's like, it's just ridiculous. And yeah, I think that's it. Next question.
Yes. How do you deal with culture clashes between your traditions and feminism? Like culture clashes.
Question. So I'm from Ghana, and does this really work, man? How do you talk? Am I good? Okay. Mate, oh wow. So my dad, okay, one thing, he hates it when I don't wear a bra, and I don't like wearing a bra because just let my boobs be free in it, and I think that comes from the fact that he subscribes to the idea that boobs are really very sexual when they're just breasts to feed a child, or they're just breasts. But like for him, if I'm not wearing a bra, I'm making a statement, like I'm explicitly telling boys to come and do whatever. So that really annoys me, and that clashes with my feminism. And me being somebody that likes wearing trainers and baggy jeans, that's not accepted in many like African cultures. You're meant to subscribe to the traditional role of a woman. You're meant to be in the kitchen when your mum's cooking. You're meant to be clean all the time. You're meant to be wearing skirts and dresses all the time, and you're not allowed to come out of that. So there are a lot of clashes with between my culture and my feminism. But being somebody that's so in love with being Ghanaian, it's just like, how much do I subscribe to the culture and everything that comes with that, and like my feminism, but then I also need to be like conscious of the fact that a lot of these like anti-feminist ideals, well, from my culture, stem from colonialism, because I'm an Akan, and like the Akan society is very matriarchal, where women like are dominant forces and they are powerful. So it's like, you want me to subscribe to these warped ideas of what women should be because of colonialism, and you're telling me that it's because of culture, when really your idea of culture is warped because you grew up in like post-colonial Ghana. So it's very difficult and it's tricky. So yeah, that's my experience.
Well, I'm from like a lone parent mum family, so like I grew up in a matriarchy, and like I suppose my mum's pretty feminist, right? And I always grew up thinking, oh, my mum must be feminist, right? She grew me up on her own, so she has to be. And then I was like recently, oh yeah, I think it's kind of weird that like society's patriarchal and like dominated by men. And she was like, oh, that's just the way things are. I'll just leave it as it is. And I was just like, Mum, what? What do you mean? There's a reason my father left. It's because like society just doesn't hold men accountable for like yeah, I think it's enough. Yes.
For me, I'm from a mixed family, so I have a white mum and I have an Iranian dad. And like, my dad's quite a religious person, and I grew up with him, and I grew up as quite a religious person. That plays a big part in my identity and who I am. I feel a lot of connection to my family, my Judaism, and the part in our past, and it means a lot to me. And I think a really big issue for me was before I came here, I went to an Orthodox Jewish school where I was taught a very different type of Judaism to what my dad and my community had brought me up on, and it really warped my perception of my religion and my own culture. Because I grew up with Middle Eastern Judaism, whereas this was very white Eurocentric Judaism, and they're completely different things. I grew up in a very matriarchal household. I'm very lucky to have a dad who is both in touch with our culture, he covers our house and books and art that's Jewish, Middle Eastern, and I have a definite connection with that. And that's a massive privilege for me because a lot of people are alienated from that. But then having to navigate your cultural connection and your feminism to other people and having to explain how they can both interact. People are so shocked when I'm yeah, I'm not going out tonight, I'm gonna stay at home and cook dinner and say prayers with my family. And they're you can speak Hebrew? I'm yeah, fluently, congratulations. Do you want me to read you a portion of the Bible? We can go there now. And yeah, I think especially when you look a certain way and you're very integrated into Western culture, people are so shocked that you have that other side to you where you don't dress yeah, sometimes I dress like this, sometimes I'll dress in traditional clothes, I'll have my hair in a hairscarf, I'll look I'm pretty sure if some of my best friends saw me walking down the street in my traditional clothes, they wouldn't recognize me. And that's cool, those are two sides to me that I'm okay with keeping separate, and I'm okay with having both of them, because one is a lot closer to me that I'd like to, look after and keep from being criticized and interacting with a Western society that would maybe try and take that away again.
Yeah, I just want to add that a lot of people think that religion especially comes hand in hand with sexism and homophobia and a lot of those things, but we need to remind ourselves that a lot of the oppression that people of colour actually experience now comes from white colonialism. And things like homophobia it's pretty much a Western phenomenon that colonialism actually introduced. So I think we need to remember that when people say, oh, all religion is really oppressive, oh, this happens, that it's actually not the root of the religion, it's how people have chosen to control others through that religion. So if you're a religious, I could go on about religion for ages, but I won't today. If you're a religious person and you constantly have to defend it and say that, oh yeah, my religion is not oppressive, well, just know that you're not alone, because a lot of people agree with you, and not any culture is inherently oppressive. And it's just all about how you deal with it and how you link it to the other aspects of your life. So don't let anyone tell you that that Islam is homophobic, don't let anyone tell you that Christianity is sexist, because none of it's actually true.
Okay, so just as a little technical point, we have 15 minutes and 2 more questions, and then we'll do 15 minutes of questions to the audience. So we're going to try and keep the next 2 answers slightly briefer so we can do it.
How do class structures and other invisible hierarchies impact the way you conduct yourself in feminist groups and discussions? I'm working class, I have a job, I can't make it to protest sometimes, and sometimes not being able to make it to protest, be oh Carissa, why don't you turn up? We're fighting for your rights. Yes, I know, I've got to work, it's hard to get gas and electric in my house, I'm sorry, I can't do everything, I've got, just, yeah.
I think people in activist circles forget that the very same oppression that you're fighting against, those people there are people that actually go through that oppression. So whilst you're fighting for their oppression, they're being oppressed. So they can't leave their oppression to come fight for their oppression. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're working class, you'll have people fighting for working class rights. But because you're working class, you're working late hours. You're working later, so you can't always make it to a protest, and understand that. And you're not any less of an activist or any less angry about your situation just because of that. Yeah, I agree. So.
I think sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone about maybe feminism and there is a difference in class, sometimes I do feel looked down by middle class people. And I think we touched on it briefly, when you're having discussions about feminism, certain words people don't get. For me, I'm working class, but I feel I have quite a good vocabulary. I feel sometimes we need to understand that class does matter in some sense, and that we need to make it accessible to all people. You can't use certain words with everyone and expect someone to be able to have a conversation with you and fully be on the same level as you. And I think also don't just assume like because you're both fighting for the same cause that class won't matter in like a conversation that you're having. I think always be aware that we all have different upbringings and different levels of understanding. Yeah.
Next question is, how do you feel about the lack of specialist mental health support for BME people? So, who wants to start with that question?
Well, my mum doesn't accept that I have mental health issues, so that's not going to happen. And onwards.
Well, I think that like the lack of specialist funding comes a lot from the fact that within BME communities, mental health doesn't really exist. Mental health issues don't exist. If there's something, if you're depressed, you pray to God, or that doesn't exist. And like it's like stigmatized. Like black people, brown people, BME people aren't allowed to be human and actually have minds that can be afflicted by like the struggles of everyday life. And I feel like once we learn to deconstruct like those ideas, that's when we will start to see like more change. Because if you don't have the people that are actually affected by those problems, campaigning for those problems, and actually recognizing that these are legitimate issues, nothing's going to change institutionally. So I just think a lot of work needs to be done within our communities in recognizing that mental health issues do exist.
I think also, like for me, I use mental health services and I have for years and years. And recently I started to realise that a lot of the issues that I was facing had to do with race and certain experiences that I'd had that were really horrible and that I kind of suppressed. And I had finally got to a place where I was ready to talk about it and discuss it. But I've never had like a woman of colour who's been a therapist. I've always had like a white woman. And it's so scary to talk to a white woman about horrible experiences, things I've been called, things that have been said to me. Like, it's so uncomfortable. And I've only had one therapist who has tried to talk to me about how race has affected me. And I think because I'm from a mixed background, I have a white parent and a black parent, that also is another element that I kind of need to figure out and to talk about. And so not having a person of colour to talk to and then not even really having someone of a mixed background is so hard to deal with. And I think there needs to be more work done to have more people of colour, more LGBT therapists for people like us, because you can't always relate to like a white person when you're not a white person.
Yeah, for me, I also use mental health services. I was on a waiting list until very recently, and I had my first counselling session the other day, and I was like waiting outside, and I was just like, oh my god, what if it's an old white man? I can't talk to an old white man about my problems, and I was freaking out. And then I met my counsellor, and I've had like this is my first ever woman of colour as a counsellor, and I am so happy. I almost burst into tears when I met her, and like that representation is so important. Specialist services matter so much. And for those of you who don't know, the budget is being released today, and it has actually already been released, and there is no secure funding for domestic violence support services. Again, there are 34 specialist refuges were closed in the last year. That means black and ethnic minority women, Muslim women, brown women, Arab women have less and less places to go, have less and less places they can access. That means language barriers, that means cultural barriers, that means like if you can't access these specialist places, people aren't going to go. I am a brown woman, my friends are brown women, black women, they're not going to go to like white institutions and request help and expect them to help because they don't understand how their oppression interacts with that. They won't go to these services because they're worried they'll get the police involved. Migrant women, undocumented women do not have the privilege of accessing mental health services in the same way other people do. And that's something that just goes under the carpet, goes on like so often. And like, yeah, having mental health is a privilege. Like being able to talk about your mental health is such a privilege. And I've only like been able to do that recently, and it's taken me 17 years and like, yeah, a heck of a lot of like horrible stuff to get there.
Yeah, just to add to Kaya's point, I think that a lot of the time therapists will actually not be able to separate the idea of oppression and depression. So like, for example, if someone is in an ethnic minority, if someone is in a sexual minority, if someone is in a gender minority, they will assume that, oh, right, you're depressed because you're black. oh, you're depressed because you're gay. And although these things can affect us very negatively, people need to learn to separate the fact that people can have mental health issues actually separate to the oppression they've experienced. And I think a lot of kind of middle-class white therapists need to acknowledge that there is a difference, and that while we need to work on both things, most of us do need to work on like both aspects of like our images of ourselves and other people's images of us. That it's a lot more complicated than that, and for psychiatrists, a lot of people just kind of like think it's really simple, and it's actually just not. So I think there definitely needs to be like diversity and more therapists, and as well as that, therapists do need to go out and learn about young people's problems, because there's a lot of therapists who are like, oh, it's hard for you at school, isn't it? And it's like, seriously? You're with CAMs, like, what are you doing? It's really stupid, and yeah, I just think that all round, therapists not only should educate them on, like, educate themselves on psychological problems, but also on the different intersectionalities, like we're educating ourselves, because it's just as important for them as it is for us, and it's just as important for them to understand how young people can have mental health problems. So, yeah.
So now we have some time for questions from the audience. Don't be shy. As you can tell, we all enjoy talking.
Oh, I think we're going to ask the honors a question.
You mentioned Caitlyn Jenner earlier, and I was just wondering what you guys' opinions on the Kardashians in relation to feminism. What are your opinions on the Kardashians in relation to feminism?
Okay, I'm quickly. What's the Jenner one with the cane rose? She's appropriating. She's appropriating black culture, and I will not stand for it. That's all.
Apparently, Kylie Jenner created dreadlocks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she did the dreadlocks. Yeah, I know that. I don't either, but that's the thing. That was the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are like so many amazing women of colour feminist icons who aren't as problematic as them, and we could like go out and find them, like go on Twitter and look at those people.
There is the whole thing about them fetishizing black men as well.
I like black culture and just
I'm not really down with that.
Oh, disgusting.
Yeah, but on the other side, I was having a conversation with my mum the other day, unfortunately, and she was talking about Kim Kardashian, and she was saying, I can't believe people are famous for no reason, I can't believe she's just famous for having a big bum, ha ha, and you just think, you've got to actually give Kim Kardashian some credit, because she turned an illegal, unconsensual sex tape into a business opportunity, and now she's really rich from it.
She's using that richness and that fame
Yeah.
to appropriate black culture and like alienate loads of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I am of course acknowledging that alienation, and the Kardashians on the whole are terrible people, but there's a lot of white feminism that is kind of like, oh yeah, just thinks women are invalid because of plastic surgery, and they're like, oh, she's not really beautiful because she's had it done, and like saying the Kardashians are famous for nothing and that they're worthless because of that. And it's just, I'm just sick of it, because it's all about jealousy and about body types. And I remember there was a tweet the other day where someone said, Kylie Jenner shouldn't post pictures of herself because she knows that other people are going to be insecure. And it was like, so someone doesn't have a right to their own body because she knows other people are going to be insecure by her body? I don't really respect Kylie Jenner as a person, but I think that's completely horrible. I think that body positivity and feminism is a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you do actually have the kind of stereotypical societal expectations of the body, you're not allowed to you're not allowed to be proud of your body because other people want to be proud of theirs. And I think that's actually just as silly as saying that, you know, overweight people and people with anorexia and things like that can't be proud of their bodies. I just wanted to complain about that. But overall, I hate Kardashians, just saying.
I think the body positivity movement has just been co-opted by white women completely. Like, it's so difficult to all beauty standards come from whiteness. Thinness and whiteness are one and the same. Like, I spent about 5 years trying to be thinner, trying to be like smaller, trying to look a certain way. I was planning, I wanted to get plastic surgery on my nose from the age of 6 to make it smaller so it looked less Jewish, because people were commenting on me by then. I started shaving my legs at the age of 10. I tried so hard to look as white as possible, to disconnect myself from anything that made me brown. And it's the same thing with body hair. White women be like, oh my god, look at my armpit hair. It's like, okay, great, you have congratulations on your blonde body hair. I have body hair that people stare at the bus stop when they sit 5 meters away from me. There is a definite privilege in being able to show off your body hair and being able to be proud of it, because for me and for black and brown women, body hair is a part of our internalized racism. Sorry, that's completely off topics of the Kardashians, but it's something that really gets on my nerves.
Any other questions from the panel?
Over here.
So I've been taking a few notes of what you speakers have said today, and I just want to say, I don't know. Okay, well, I'm just going to say this. Right. So listening to what you guys have said thus far, I've noticed that there's a common theme, and that is oppression. And the word has come up several times, I wasn't counting. But I think the issue here, I find, is that it's an oppression Olympics, isn't it? Because everyone faces oppression one way or another, if that's the word we're going to use. And funnily enough, even though intersectionality is about including people, I don't see a man for some reason, even though feminism is meant to be about equality and I just want to notice that I just want to
I'm a man.
Why did you go like that? That seemed a bit dismissive.
Oh no, I mean sorry, as in I didn't notice before. I didn't mean no. I just sorry, I didn't notice. Yes, so I was just saying that oppression has been going on, and it seems that it can go from one. So there's this black oppression, right? And then we're going to go, oh no, dark-skinned people within the black category are more oppressed. So I just wonder, where is this going to end? And actually, I've noticed here.
It's going to end when people stop.
Wait,
being
hold on. I
oppressive.
just want to finish, and then I will compose my final question. Is that people are using this feminism thing to sort of solve their own internal issues, to sort of fight it out for them. But this is just, I'm just wondering, because there's only one narrative here, and there's oppression. I just want to take our mind away that we're in the West right now, right? And apparently this is where white culture, whatever is, and this isn't, these issues here, I think what we're doing is, since we live in such good lives in comparison to the rest of the world, is people are trying to find issues and come up with them. Oh, there's this, there's that. But there are issues all over the world, and we're trying to take our better lives, relatively, and make issues out of them. And make issues after issues after issues about this struggle and that struggle and this oppression and that oppression. And it seems like it isn't going to end, and one oppression is going to get higher than another. It's like a game almost. Oh, I'm oppressed because of this, and that the sort of idea that, okay, we're going to fight and make other people change their opinions. It's fine that other people have other opinions that differ from yours. That's completely fine. I think some people...
This isn't really a question anymore, is it?
I'm going
We quite like to... I think everybody has answers for you and has stuff to say.
All right. Oh,
But
I'm
if
going
you
to
could give us the
finish.
opportunity
Do you have
to
a
speak, because we only have
specific
15
I
minutes,
shall
there are other
My
people with
question-
several questions.
My question is, what do you guys intend to do with this idea that is oppression of oppression? A lot of these things seem like they're your own issues, and everyone faces oppression. So why must you then see yourself as a victim? What is it that's so great about being a victim?
I don't know what you're saying. It's okay. I don't know what you're saying, but like, you're making a point that's not really relevant. She's saying that because she's black, she's gone through oppression, she's gone through like struggle. I can relate to her. So you're saying that it's a personal. No, I'm not. You said it's a personal problem. It's not a personal problem because it can't actually be generalized to everyone. So I don't really know what your argument is.
Nobody's
It
trying
seems like
to
you're
find
just
issues.
It's a real problem.
We never
People
went out
actually
of our
do
way
really
to be oppressed. We're not finding issues. We're just accepting that this is our reality, and we're taking our freedom, we're reclaiming our narratives, and we're talking about that. So why is that such a problem? I don't understand.
I just want to say that, like, intersectionality is about, and you said everyone is oppressed. Yes, everyone is oppressed, and intersectionality is about acknowledging that people are oppressed in different ways, because the narrative that the media portrays is that oppression is very sort of exclusive to certain groups of people, and only certain groups of people get to speak up about their oppression. So intersectionality is about acknowledging that, yes, we do all have oppressive forces in our lives, and it's not an oppression Olympics. We're not all competing to be the most oppressed. We definitely...
Exactly. We are the global minority and we're fighting back. Our voices are the voices of people that have deemed to be powerless for too long.
We
People are
definitely...
taking back their voices. They're
Yeah.
deconstructing internalized racism, internalized misogyny, and everything we talk about, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, that is all personal. Political and personal are
It's
the
the
same
same
thing.
thing.
Separating individuals from their oppression is how oppression continues.
Exactly.
When you take the face away from the words, we are no longer people, we are concept. No, my oppression isn't conceptual, it's not a theory, it's happening to me every day of my life. And I'm up here deconstructing it and fighting it alongside my sisters, my friends. That's what we're doing. And by saying nobody is competing with each other, nobody is fighting anybody else. We are only fighting one thing, and that is the forces that work to oppress us and have been doing for thousands of years.
I also think it's worth noting that it's super duper hard to come up as a marginalised group and speak with your own voice. It's so hard. It's so hard to say, oh my god, I feel that bad. It's hard. So coming up and speaking, it's political, it's revolutionary, and it's important.
It took me 15 years of my life to actually accept that I was a person who hated themselves. So for you to come up here and tell me I'm finding issues when this is something I've been dealing with for 15 years, that really rubs me the wrong way, because I'm not finding an issue found me, and I've taken the freedom, I've taken my power to speak about this. So I'm not finding anything, and we're not competing to be the most oppressed, because we're just speaking about our narratives, and that's all we're doing. That's why you're hearing a lot of oppression, because we're all oppressed, and we're speaking about this is a safe space to talk about oppression. Simple.
I definitely say that with regard to you saying there are other areas in the world which are suffering more than us, we are effectively, although we cannot represent everyone and people have very different experiences from us, we are effectively representing the people who cannot be represented. We are representing people in countries where you can be killed for being gay. We are representing people where black lynchings still happen. We are representing the people who cannot speak up for themselves in parts of the world where their voices are completely stifled. So we're not only speaking for the Western world, we're actually speaking for a worldwide community of people who can't necessarily speak for themselves. So I definitely say we are advocating for that. And I'd also like to say that we are definitely fighting problems in other parts of the world. We are going to protests to save Aleppo. We are definitely talking about the Syrian war. We are definitely talking about the Middle East. We are definitely talking about Israel versus Palestine. We are definitely talking about all the problems that you think we are effectively ignoring. And we have not mentioned any of those, which is actually kind of bad of us. But this was not about us mentioning other places in the world where it was worse. It's mentioning about how we are personally affected. So
it's really ridiculous that you're using the narratives of people who are like us to oppress us. Say, well, you don't have it as bad as them. I'm not going to compete against my family, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins who still live in Iran for oppression. It's not a competition. So why are you comparing us to people in other parts of the world?
People need to understand that oppressions are different, and that it's not a suffering Olympics. One oppression isn't worse than the other. People need to understand that's such a dangerous way to think.
Yeah.
Just because you don't think my oppression amounts up to yours, you think it's okay to marginalise me and ignore my visibility. No.
But despite that, we do want to acknowledge that we have not represented everyone, and that we do really, really want to help people all over the world, and that we are not trying to be exclusive towards just anyone at all. So regarding that point, we definitely do want to represent everyone. So.
Okay, any more questions? Also, just to point out, we are because we're an intersectional panel, we are going to call on women, non-binary, people of colour first, because we're going to prioritise their voices in this space. So if you're not picked first, it's not for you. It's not against you. It's just how it is, isn't it? Can we get a microphone here, please? It's so difficult.
How do you guys feel about speaking up about an issue without being the sole representative for everyone else that looks like you or is like you? So for example, I know to some people the whole idea of feminism is a bit taboo. So if you were to bring up or start up a conversation about feminism, people assume that whatever you say is correct. And not saying that it's not, but how do you feel about people just internalizing what you say and just basing everything they know based on you?
Well, I like to go into conversations believing that people are their own people and can come up with their own decisions, and understand that what I'm telling you is my own personal opinion and it's not the objective truth. So I always make sure I say it
like personally, I talk about my experiences. I just try to be very clear about this is me. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Really me.
I think it's always important to not have the mindset that you know everything and that you're so woke or whatever. Always to have an open mind and understand that you can take from people, but also you don't have all the answers and that you're here to learn as well.
Okay, any other questions? We've got two at the back.
Yes, Fergus.
Hi. First of all, I want to say well done, because I think what you stand for is brilliant. I think how you talk today is absolutely amazing. My question is actually for you in particular, because you mentioned that you have an Iranian dad.
Yeah.
I'm from an Iranian family, and I struggle to find the difference between and find the line between the Western culture and my culture. And I find it very difficult to show to my parents and to my family that I've grown up here and my beliefs are a bit different, and the way I like to live my life is a little bit different. I just wanted to know, how do you guys deal with that situation?
First of all, we're going to have 15 minutes after this where people are going to get food and stuff, so you and me should talk then as well. But for me, my culture is also very wrapped up in my religion. So I think my perception of being Iranian is very much being Jewish Iranian, being from that specific background. And my family left for political reasons because they were persecuted. So there's a definite basically my whole family history is involved diaspora and stuff. And I'm very lucky now to be the first member of my family since my great grandparents to have somewhere stable to live, where I'm not being persecuted on a daily basis in the same way they were, and I have the privilege to get in touch with my roots in a way that they didn't. There are no photographs of my family in Iran except for a couple. There is barely anything. This is a necklace that my grandmother brought with her when she left, and that's all we have of our heritage there. And I think finding the difference between your culture and Western culture is not necessarily having to separate them, but balancing them and just taking it to ownership and making it your own thing.
Hi, is this working? Yeah, hi. So thanks, and thank you. Again, I agree with Naz, this is brilliant, well done, many commendations for organising it. I just wanted to ask a question about identity politics, because one of the criticisms of the kind of identity politics movement from the 1980s is that actually, along with the kind of development of new forms of capitalism, identity politics can be divisive. So potentially intersectionality could be, I'm not saying it is, I'm saying it could be divisive in the sense that it splits a movement as opposed to unifying whole groups of people that face oppression. So I just wanted to know, really, and I think I'm trying to expand on the point that was critiqued earlier, that when we do reduce, or do we reduce identity down, do we lose some form of unity that could present a more cohesive opposition to what many people on the left who are involved in the politics of liberation would argue should be a unified response to capitalism and patriarchy. Do you understand? Is that clear?
I take 80 sociology, so I literally just studied this. The broad sweep that mainstream liberal feminism and radical feminists say that all women experience patriarchy. We all experience patriarchy, but we experience it differently depending on other interacting oppressions. Like a black woman might feel more comfortable with a black man than they feel in the presence of a white woman because of the way social structures are, So I think just saying all women experience patriarchy, yes, we all do, but we experience it differently. So I think it's more harmful to say we all experience patriarchy. I think it's more harmful to say that than it is to say we all experience patriarchy in different ways.
Just the simple thing of adding something onto the end of a sentence and accepting the differences in our experiences, but also I find a lot of left-wing politics to be extremely dominated by cis white old men, and I know because I talk at their events. I've been to the TUC, I've spoken to like 1,000 people, and I saw like 2 people of colour in the audience. Why am I talking to people who don't represent me? Why am I educating these people? Go and pick up a book. There are so many reading lists, and like, yeah, I think left-wing politics would love to erase a lot of identities that they're uncomfortable with, but don't want to admit they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, I definitely say intersectionality is about uniting people in the sense that we don't all have the same struggles, but it's a way for people who don't necessarily face the struggles of a certain group to actually help them in a way that's productive. For example, I'm not a person of colour, but I see myself as educated on that issue to an extent, and I'd love to be more educated, and I'd love to support my friends, and just people of colour as an advocate, as a white person, just however I can, via learning about the intersectionalities that are part of feminist culture. So I think it's more about raising issues so that we can all understand each other better, and so that we can all unite each other better, and it can be dividing sometimes, because as that person said, some people do see oppression as a competition, and some people do see it as a sort of oppression Olympics, but I think it's, at the end of the day, it's better to sort of use intersectional feminism as a way to understand each other and to help elevate other people's voices, and to all stand together so that we can actually fight for our individual rights and our collective rights.
Just a specific thing. If any of you do want to educate yourselves on experiences of women of colour, Smart Girl Club, if you go on their page, they have a book list. Get all of the books, read all of them, they're amazing. So, last question? Last question? Okay, this is going to be a quick one because we only have 5 minutes left.
Okay, this is for the whole panel. So, you guys were talking about class in relation to intersectional feminism earlier. I just wanted to ask, so how do you think the suppression of working class women, working class like feminists, so for example, women in trade unions, compared to the suppression of feminists based on their identity, for example, women of colour?
Do you mean like how?
So like how do you compare them?
Why do we need
As a
Like
working
in
class
history,
black woman, I
so
can't.
like the history of it.
Yeah.
How is that? How do you
I don't think I believe in comparing them. I think I believe in respecting all of them.
Feminism exists because there are different oppressions faced by working class feminists and like women of colour feminists, and like the oppressions will be different and they will intersect. So I don't think they should be compared, personally.
Yeah, I mean, when I go into feminist spaces and I'm like black and working class, it's not, oh, well, we're going to focus specifically on this issue, but I mean, I don't know, I can't separate my identity, it's just me. Yeah.
Do you want to wrap up?
Yes, no, important. Okay, we're selling our feminist zines there. Please buy some. Yeah, we're raising money for Rape Crisis. There's food there too. So if you just want to stay behind.
Yeah,
We are.
And thank you to all the staff who've helped, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who came
I just want to say thank you.
We need to give all the panelists a round of applause.
No, this one's powerful. Listen, yeah, before we leave, don't feel bad about who you are. People make you feel bad for your oppression. Your oppression is your oppression. Talk about your oppression. Don't feel bad. Live your life. Be free. Yeah.
Buy a zine, give your money to charity, be a good feminist ally.